This presentation is Yes, Private For-Profit Corporations Should Be Allowed to Run U.S. Prisons by Savannah Hurst, Abby Pilling, and Isla Hickman. First off, what are for-profit prisons? For-profit prisons are private prisons owned by outside corporations or non-governmental agencies. According to Study.com, a private prison is any confinement place that the government contracts to a separate entity owned and operated by individuals or private constitutions. The government then pays an institution a monthly rate for every incarcerated person they hold. The main difference between a private and public prison is the ownership status. Public prisons are wholly operated by the local, state, or federal government. Profit is made from a stipend from the government for every inmate incarcerated. For example, if the government pays an institution $1,000 per inmate and housing the inmate only costs $800, the private prison will be able to save $200 for other funds and finances. Private prisons also benefit from labor performed by the inmates, further saving money. Duties usually performed by blue-collar workers such as sanitation, laundry, groundskeeping, and plumbing are redistributed as inmate responsibilities to keep the institution running. The history of for-profit prisons. The first private prison was a public prison privatized for the purpose of profit in Louisiana of 1844. As a result of the Western expansion, the public jails available became full of prisoners and proved to be inadequate, which led to prisoners being held in ships. Prisons such as the San Quentin State Prison was built mainly to hold convicts and was completed in 1854, initially only holding 250 male prisoners. This prison is another early private prison in the United States. The Reagan administration, which focused on the war on drugs in the 80s, led to a growth of private prison popularity. The war led to an overcrowding of public prisons institutions, and to reduce this overcrowding problem, the broad adoption of private prisons kicked off. Today, there are more private prisons, with more than 150,000 inmates currently incarcerated. In the graphic, you can see state prisoner ratios. States that are darker red in color hold a higher percentage of prisoners in private prisons, and gray states don't practice for-profit prisons at all. Then why are private prisons such a contentious topic? The disadvantages observed in private prisons are few. The reasons evoke emotion from non-convicted citizens, as the prisons are run and managed might seem to violate certain ethics. For example, private prisons include a lack of security and safety concerns, poor conditions, and the potential for corruption. Private prisons are thought to exploit prisoners for corporate gain. Their use of free labor is seen as a negative addition to an already punishing life for the inmates. Finally, privatizing prisons is costly and leaves the most expensive prisoners to public prisons. If the government is paying stipends, it's assumed that private prisons will take inmates that greater their leftovers after expenses are paid.
The pros or advantages for profit corporations to run U.S. prisons are: it lowers operating costs, money being put back into the economy, and creates jobs. It controls the population of prisoners. It allows innovative programs to lower rates of imprisonment. And it transforms the broken government-run prison system. Ways that for-profit corporation-run prisons save money is private prisons save money from 10 to 15% average savings on the operation costs based on 14 independent cost comparison studies. So 14 different companies have looked at this and seen that 10 to 15% are being saved each year, saving taxpayer dollars, federal dollars, and many other people's money. It also ends up saving money based on the speed of construction is another way they save money. They also save money because they are free of many costly rules imposed by government projects, such as purchasing restrictions and subcontractor quotas, or the waiting for approval through Congress and stuff like that. They're able to build with their subcontractors and don't have to have a certain amount to make sure money is in the economy. But because they're not a federal institution and the federal government just pays them, this money is going back in to the economy, allowing more money circulation in the economy, and it also is creating more jobs for the community as well. Second, for-profit corporations running U.S. prisons controls the population of prisoners. During the war of drugs, it's made a lot of a lot of drug charges have a minimal jail or prison sentence, meaning if you are finding marijuana or crack or any of those illegal drug substances, you have a minimum of 6 to a year in prison, and they can't go lower than that, which has led to an increase of people being charged, meaning the Bureau and the government therefore are forced to release inmates in-home incarceration or slaps on the wrist. But because of the war on drugs and stuff like that, they end up just filling prisons to overcapacity. So since 1984, the number of inmates has risen 100% in local jails, 213% in state prisons, 290% in federal facilities, and incarceration rates have well over doubled in the 1980s and above. And it's not just back then, it's now too. In 2020, 9 state prison systems were operating at 100% capacity or above, and the Bureau itself is at 103 capacity. So because of this capacity, it makes it unsafe for inmates, it makes it unsafe for people working there, and also makes it so the inmates aren't getting the proper care that they need, as well as the proper food they're needing, or proper programs to help them reintroduce, to help them not commit more crimes when they get out, or be able to get the rehab that they need. Because of this, the for-profit corporations running the U.S. prisons, they're able to have more room for people and be able to limit to make sure there's not more capacity than they can handle, not making it a burden on their inmates as well as their staff. So they're able to regulate that a lot more because they're not a federal institution and being forced by certain laws. Privately run prisons are allowed to have innovative programs to lower rates of imprisonment, and that's our third reason why this is a good thing. The GEO Group and Corporation, an American private prison conglomerate, offers individual treatment plans as well, which is drug abuse education and treatment, adult education, GED preparations, life skills course, parenting and family reintegration, anger management work, and work readiness vocational skills. The programs are offered as in-custody residence and non-residential options, allowing people to access programs while in prison, out on parole or probation, and while reintegrating into their communities. And when these things are happening, like when prisoners or inmates get their GEDs or learn life skills, they're able to go back into society and have something to offer rather than just having their criminal record. And this will cut crime rates or them recommitting a crime in 50%, and then their children recommitting crimes to 75% less than what it was if they didn't have these programs. In New Zealand, prison operated by Serco, a British company, has men make their own meals, do their own laundry, schedule their own medical and family appointments, and maintain a resume that to apply for facility jobs at the prison. So this is helping them get those qualities and experience that they need that they wouldn't be able to get in normal overcrowded prisons that the federal government is running right now. The prison also responds to the job market, opening cafes to train men to be baristas or coffee shops, so that they can be able to help outside of prison. Programs that focus on inmate re-entry into society and deal with drug and other abuse will lower recidivism rates. And for 4, transform the broken government-run prison system. So I have some quotes. One is from someone in New Zealand, and they said, "The prisons in New Zealand earn bonuses for doing better than government prisons at cutting recidivism. They get an even bigger bonus if they beat the government at reducing it, among with their indigenous populations. And the prison companies are charged and held responsible for the government deems unacceptable events like riots, escapes, and unnatural deaths." And Georgetown University says that the private sector was responsible for designing the solution that would achieve a desired social outcome. And then Oliver Brousseau, also in regards to the U.S. private prisons, is the prisons is designed for rehabilitation. The strength of these public-private partners is that they bring the best practices and innovation from all over the world, allowing local authorities to benefit from not only private capital, but also from the best people, the best practices from other countries. So this relationship with public and private can be used very well, as we can see in New Zealand, where if something bad happens, they are held accountable and they will be charged. Or they can do better than the government-run prisons, and because they're doing better, they get incentive. They have skin in the game, right? They have something to lose if things go bad, making them to be able to be more innovative, to make it a better experience, and to be able to reintroduce these inmates and these people back into society. Because that's the whole point of prison, is for it to be a rehabilitation, not a place where right now it is, where they're just sent there to fulfill out their punishment, to make sure that they don't do it again. But they aren't getting the programs they need. And these private prisons are better equipped to do that because they have more resources and they have incentive to do so.
Privatizing prisons can reduce prison overpopulation, making the facilities safer for inmates and employees. When prisons are overpopulated, it increases risks of mental health problems, increases violence, self-harm, and suicide. Private prisons can transform the broken government-run prison system. Private prisons offer innovative programs to lower the rates of re-imprisonment. In an article from the Inside Sources, they wrote that if reform-minded individuals agree that prison time should be used to prepare inmates for release, it is important to note that where occupational and rehabilitative services currently exist in the U.S. correctional facilities, the private and nonprofit sectors usually provide them. Designing new prison programs that better accommodate rehabilitative and professional training services requires forward thinking, which government-run correction systems typically lack. This is where the profit motive of private companies can serve the public good. As private companies continue to provide services for jails and prisons, their profitability is the result of an increasing willingness by government corrections agencies to admit they need help. Instead of seeking to ban private prisons, these entities should be encouraged to devise modern, cutting-edge rehabilitation and job training practices that help reduce the prison population and recidivism rates. Getting the U.S. correction system from its sad state to a more rehabilitative approach will be difficult, especially after decades of correction policies that sought to punish inmates with long sentences. But solutions should solve problems, not exacerbate them, and getting rid of private prisons would make criminal justice reforms much more difficult to achieve.